A former CIA director allegedly blowing the whistle on the Hunter Biden laptop story, saying the Biden campaign pushed to discredit the story in an attempt to ultimately discredit then-President Trump. NTD's Arian Pazdar brings us the latest.
In 2020, former CIA Deputy Director Michael Morell was one of 51 former intelligence officials who signed off this well-known letter discrediting the Hunter Biden laptop story. The letter was published right after the New York Post first reported on the laptop. It said the laptop story has all the classic earmarks of a Russian information operation. Now on Thursday night, Congressman Jim Jordan wrote Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who at the time was an advisor to Biden's presidential campaign. He wrote that, according to Morell, it was Blinken who first asked him to write the letter discrediting the laptop story. Jordan's message to Blinken on Thursday includes transcription of Morell's private testimony, stating, "But prior to Secretary Blinken's call, you did not have any intent to write a statement? I did not." The testimony then goes on to show that one of the reasons for Morell to write the letter was to help Vice President Biden. You wanted to help the Vice President? Why? Because I wanted him to win the election. During a 2020 debate, President Biden used the letter to discredit then-President Trump.
There are 50 former national intelligence folks who said that what he's accusing me of is a Russian plant. They have said that this has all the five former heads of the CIA, both parties, say what he's saying is a bunch of garbage.
It was later confirmed that the laptop was not part of a Russian disinformation campaign, but had been abandoned at a computer repair shop. Congressman Jordan was on Fox News on Thursday, indicating this letter started a misinformation campaign.
That letter became the basis for keeping this information from the American people.
Jordan is now demanding that Blinken answer a series of questions about Morell's testimony and provide records of related communication. He gave Blinken until May 4th to provide the requested documentation. I reached out to the White House and Secretary Blinken for comment, but didn't hear back before broadcast. Arian Pazdar, NTD News.
To discuss Hunter Biden and the Biden family's business dealings, we just had a chance to speak with former White House insider Mike McCormick. McCormick worked as a White House press office stenographer for 15 years, including under the Obama administration. He recently blew the whistle on President Biden's alleged kickback schemes during the time when he was vice president. Mike McCormick, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, absolutely. Great to be here.
Mike, you had a very interesting sort of bird's eye view into the Obama administration, specifically Joe Biden's administration as vice president. If you could tell us, what was it like? What did you witness, and what were some of your concerns while you were there?
What I saw, my job as a White House stenographer, I was present whenever the vice president or one of his staffers was dealing with the press, speaking as in an informal gaggle or with a major speech or even a briefing. So there had to be a recording by me that I typed into a transcript. And I was the only stenographer that worked for him for that. The duration of time I worked for him was 2011 to 2017. So, and I traveled internationally when he traveled. I traveled with him to China twice. I traveled with him to Russia and to Ukraine. And so it gave me an inside view how he interacted. And your question basically says, you know, why didn't we know more about who the real Joe Biden was? And the reason is because there was a lot of cover-up by the press. They really didn't report what I saw. So in 2000, about 3 years ago, I wrote a book called Joe Biden Unauthorized and the 2020 Crack of the Democratic Party, because there was all these incidents that I witnessed that no one reported. And that was just the top line. About a year and a half ago, I got a hold of the Hunter Biden laptop, a copy of the Hunter Biden laptop from Marco Polo, an anti-corruption nonprofit. So I started looking at it, and they gave it to me and said, look, here it is, you don't have to pay us, we're not paying you, just look at it. I started a Substack based on what I saw in there, and I know a lot about the day-to-day operations.
So you could kind of put together some of the pieces better than most.
Big timeline, right? Yes, exactly. And so my Substack that I write about it is Midnight in the Laptop of Good and Evil. And I've got global reach now. It's going around the world because I've been reporting about the reality of the corruption that's in the Biden White House, the Obama-Biden White House, that this laptop is revealing now that everyone sort of sees how Joe Biden is as president And they're really wondering, who is this guy?
So you probably, you've heard of some of the speculation that we're seeing with the Biden ties to Ukraine. There's also a lot of ties to, talk of ties to China. If you kind of elaborate on what you may have seen or felt with those ties.
He had business relations through his son in Ukraine, and he's lying when he says he doesn't. And that's a crime. He's a criminal for doing that. He violated U.S. law, and I was a witness to that specifically on a flight on Air Force 2 going into Ukraine on April 21st, 2014. And his current national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, then his vice presidential national security advisor. And basically what happened was, Jake Sullivan came back, like I said, I worked with the press, so I'm in the back of the plane. He has a meeting with Joe Biden in the front of the plane. Joe Biden tells him what to say. Jake Sullivan comes back, but he's speaking as a senior administration official, so he's anonymous. Well, I record the thing, record it and make a transcript. About 6 months ago in October, I'm looking through the old transcripts I did, and I saw this passage of the transcript from that flight where he starts talking about fracking. And as I've been doing all this reporting for my Substack, I realized fracking was what Burisma did as its specialty. And he basically had come from Joe Biden to promote Burisma. What I also knew from going into that laptop was that 3 days before we flew on this flight is when Hunter Biden joined Burisma. So Joe Biden knew that. Joe Biden was on this plane flying into Ukraine to use American taxpayer dollars for a kickback scheme. His son would get money, he would get money.
Mike McCormick, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And with a different perspective, joining us next to further explore the Hunter Biden allegations, as well as those against former President Trump, we had a chance to sit down with A. Scott Bolden, an attorney with Reed Smith, a law firm specializing in white-collar crime. He's the former chair of the Washington, D.C. Democratic Party and former chair of the National Bar Association PAC. A. Scott Bolden, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Mr. Bolden, if I could just get your thoughts, kind of post-mortem, the Trump indictment, the arraignment. We spoke to you that day. You were somewhat underwhelmed. Just give us your overall high-level overview.
Well, the power of that day was the historical nature of the indictment and the arraignment of a former president. That wasn't underwhelming. I think the indictment itself, some 30 counts plus of fraudulent handling of documents or changing documents in furtherance of a crime, which is essentially the sum and substance of the indictment. That was underwhelming politically because you would think that it would have included conspiracy and racketeering, which would have been a very complicated indictment, and you'd have to have a speaking indictment and really connect the dots. That would have gotten the government out of the political criticism of that this is all about Stormy Daniels. But make no mistake, this is a simple indictment. It's got 31 counts, I think. And in that indictment, all they've got to do is prove fraud, that in fact these business records were altered in furtherance of another crime. What that other crime is could be state or federal campaign finance violations. It certainly feels like money laundering because they were trying to hide the money, the payment to her, but you could have in furtherance of a conspiracy, tax violations as far as filings of state and federal taxes. And so there are a lot of crimes out there that this act of misleading or changing these, altering these documents could be in furtherance of. The government was really smart here in not defining or indicating what that crime or crimes could be. But at some point in time, before the judge or the jury, they're going to have to identify those crimes and prove those crimes as well in order to show furtherance of why these business records were altered.
When it comes to equal treatment, equal justice, President Biden and Hunter Biden, what do you say to that viewpoint?
Well, you've got to let these investigations run their course, and the facts drive these investigations and potential charges, not politics, right? I hear elected officials talk about the facts and, you know, they're on the Hill and they're doing these investigations and they're sharing all this information. There's so much more to a criminal investigation than political statements or one document, if you will. Those documents and those witnesses who are against the Bidens, that has to be tested and cross-examined and corroborated. If you're not doing that, then no one is below the law. But you have to raise everyone to the same standard, and you can't go after Hunter Biden and you can't go after President Biden without having the facts, without having corroboration, and without being convinced that the law, the elements of the law, are supported by the facts. You apply the facts to those laws, and then it's up to the prosecutor, with their discretion, as to whether they can prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt, whether it's Donald Trump or Hunter Biden. It's the same standard. And fortunately, you can't get around that standard. So all the Republican complaints about Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, got it. And they want to investigate, they want to investigate. But up to this day, every investigatory body that's looked at Hunter Biden and Joe Biden and the allegations about China and what have you, none of them have found it necessary to bring indictments or to independently investigate them. That's pretty powerful, because these are systems where you had a Republican administration when those issues were given life, and now you have a Democratic administration, DOJ, which is an independent agency. I believe that. I practice before them all the time. I go against them all the time. And so it's not an equal assessment. It's not a fair assessment, right? It's not comparable. But sit tight. If they do get indicted, if there is evidence supporting Hunter Biden being indicted or charged, I'm pretty confident the special prosecutor or DOJ will bring those charges. There's no reason for them not to do their job, despite politics.
A. Scott Bolden, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.